Welcome to 8 and 9 Figure Mentors, the podcast that gets inside the heads of people who have started, grown, run, and exited 8, 9, and 10 figure businesses. My name's Tim Cameron Kitchen. I'm your host, founder of digital marketing agency Exposure Ninja, and I'm now building a group of companies at Shinobi Capital. Today, I'm joined by Dana Hendrix. Now, Dana's had an incredibly non-traditional career trajectory that sort of started out like he was going to become a professional footballer in high school. He then found that he had a bit of a knack for accounting after a very strange way of getting into accounting. And he's risen through the ranks at the US home builder DSLD Homes, and in particular the mortgage arm of that DSLD Mortgage very, very quickly. He's 30 years old. He's SVP of Finance at DSLD Mortgage. They did over $500 million in mortgages last year. They'll do over $1 billion this year. Dana is extraordinary. He is one of those people who, in fact, I don't think I've ever met anyone like him. I said to him at the end of this call, it's like he was born without the piece of self-doubt that most humans are born with, right? Every human has self-doubt that stops us from doing crazy things and taking on ridiculous challenges. It's like Dana was born without that piece. Now, I first met Dana when he became a client of our digital marketing agency Exposure Ninja. And I remember the team coming off that first call with him, really excited. And someone messaged me and said, Tim, you've got to meet Dana. You guys are going to get on so well. And we really did. Dana's super ambitious. He's super aggressive with his targets. He's also got really practical and I think a realistic approach to work-life balance and how he sees the sacrifices he's making now to build for the future. I hope you enjoy this episode with Dana Hendrix. Dana, welcome to 8 and 9 Figure Mentors.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to start by visiting some of the, key formative moments in your life. And you found your way into accounting, which became a sort of a big part of your life, I guess, and finances through a pretty unconventional method. I wondered if you could tell us a bit about your journey into the world of accounting.
Yeah, I was like, it's quite a unique story. But it all started, so I was playing football in high school in a small town in Louisiana. And part of the rules, if you wanted to play on the games on Friday, is that you actually had to go to class, right? So I got in trouble, but they didn't want me to miss the games. So my punishment, instead of being suspended, was that they put me into accounting class, right? So I took that and I wound up taking a knack for it. But part of my punishment was that the teacher sent me to take the state accounting test to see like where you ranked in your local area. And I came in first. And then when we go from there, she sent me to take the state test for the entire state. And I wound up coming in second to people who went to very large private schools and all that stuff. So that's kind of how I got into accounting. I figured out I had a knack for it at that point. And, it's just kind of went up from there.
So was that the first time you'd ever sort of encountered accounting finance? Did you have any inclination that you might be sort of unnaturally good before then, or was this the first time?
No, that was the first time. So I grew up, my dad had used car lots. Obviously, you'd sell the cars. I'd help them with the books and stuff like that from there. We would help people sometimes with their tax returns, see how much money they were going to get back from their refund. That would be their money that they would use for their down payment to buy the car. All right. So never really took it as anything else besides that. Just I was always better at numbers than I was with, say, English or reading or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But no, I never thought I was unnaturally talented at it.
That's wild. And I mean, obviously you got in trouble for not going to class. Was that fairly typical of young Dana?
Yeah. So it was more typical than not. I've never been one that, I was always a good kid, right? I was like, but I kind of never really like authority too much. So I always kind of ran up against that. So it would be if I felt like I didn't need to do something, or if I just thought it was a waste of my time, I would always kind of have a rub there with whoever was trying to place that structure on me that I didn't feel like it was needed. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't per se a bad kid, but I just kind of like doing my own thing.
Yeah, it can work either way, can't it? Would you say that that's an important component of your success to date? Because from the conversations we've had, you strike me as quite unconventional and not afraid to challenge, I guess, established conventional thinking.
Correct. Yeah. So I think how I would like to say it is I have three kids, a boy and two girls, and how I see it is that it's kind of aggravating whenever you're young, right? Because you want your kids to listen to you and you want people to listen to you whenever they're younger. But whenever you get older, that is actually a talent that you want to have, right? Is that you're like, okay, no, I need to go this way because this is the actual right way to go, not just because everybody's doing it. So I would say that is a very large component to my success is that I've just always been willing to take a chance if I think it's the right thing to do and not really worry about how anybody interprets that. And I'm willing to take the consequences that come with that.
So have you always, I mean, I think it takes a certain level of self-confidence to do that, right? You have to have high conviction that your way is right, or that you're willing to back your way. Have you always found that easy, or are there times in your life where you've maybe not been so confident?
So no, I would say that there were definitely times in my life where I was not as confident, and thank you for that. Is that it's not always knowing that the decision that you're making is the right decision, but it's knowing that you trust yourself and you trust your instincts and in your decision making process. That if you did make the wrong step, that you're smart enough and you have good enough people around you to correct it. Right. I like, so you have to be willing to say, okay, no, that was the wrong decision. Now we need to go this way. Right. I was like, so it takes time to build up to that. You have to fall down. I always tell everybody, why do we fall down? So we can learn to pick ourselves back up. Right. I was like, so you have to go through that philosophy and that process, and it builds that confidence and that instinct in your gut, in my opinion, to know what risks aren't really risks.
You've not had a long career, right? You're a pretty young guy. You, like, how old are you?
So I'm 30 years old.
That's wild.
Yeah, you can't tell from all the gray hairs I'm starting to get though.
Oh, that's isn't it? But you've been with two different companies, right? And your ascension has been pretty rapid. So I wondered if you could tell us a bit about how you ended up at DSLD and how you rose through the ranks there so quickly.
Yeah, so we'll start out with how I got here. So I came out of college. I had an accounting and finance degree coming out of college. And so I took that. I went and worked at the largest accounting firm in the state of Louisiana. Most kids that come out of school with an accounting and finance degree that have their CPA exam leave. So most of them don't stay in Louisiana. Most of them go to Houston. They go to a bigger market where they can get paid more, right? And that's kind of the life path. So I decided to stay because I wanted to make something of myself in Louisiana with everybody that I loved and care about here, right? So I decided to stay, go to the largest accounting firm in the state of Louisiana, which gave me great exposure to all the larger businesses in the state, right? So I got to meet at a very early age high-level people in all the largest businesses in the state of Louisiana for the most part. So it wasn't direct access where I'm having their personal cell phone number or anything like that. But when you're doing an audit of a large company, the people who you're dealing with are your CFOs, CEOs, COOs. And if you're asking them good questions, they're willing to teach you stuff, right? So I started out there, made a lot of different connections, got to see a bunch of different jobs along my way there. And that led me here to DSLD. That was actually one of the clients that we worked on. So the partner that was on the job at the accounting firm would never let me work on this job because she knew if she did that they would want to hire me and that I would want to leave. So
by the way, what was it about DSLD that they were like, oh, that they'll try and hire you? What was it about that company in particular?
Is that even from my accounting professors, whenever I was younger, they always told me like, so going into my junior year in accounting, I was taking advanced accounting during the summer. And I walk in there, the professor, this is the first time I've ever had him. And he asked me, he was like, what are you doing here? I was like, I'm here for the accounting class. He's like, yeah, no, you're not. He goes, he told me I don't look like an accountant. You don't act like an accountant. He's like, you're not an accountant. You're going to struggle. So we go through the summer class, I finished with the highest grade in the class. And he still tells me at the end, he's like, what I told you on the first day is correct. He was like, you got the highest grade in the class. He goes, but you are not an accountant. He goes, you have more skills to go do other stuff besides just this.
Right.
So that's kind of was the theme that followed me through my accounting career, is that I was good at it, but they were like, we can't just keep you behind the table over here running numbers. Is that if we put you out in front of groups of people, you tend to, people follow you, they lead you, you have good ideas, right? So that was kind of the realm, and I'm kind of a more of a country boy-esque. So a home building company kind of fits more into that. It's more relaxed. It's not as suit and tie every day as being a proper banker.
Love it. So they did poach you,
Yeah.
but they didn't poach you into, your SVP of finance now, right? And you got there 3 years. Like, that's pretty rapid for someone who's so young. So what happened?
Yeah. So went from it, came over to the assistant controller side of the whole home builder. So the company that owns all the different underlying companies. And I was assigned to help with the mortgage company. And on my first day here, I tell them this, is that I took them literal for their word when they told me, if you see something that you think you can do better or that's wrong, we expect you to fix it. So I didn't know where that line stopped at, right? So back to the beginning of this conversation where we were like, I'm kind of just willing to keep going until I get to where I need to go, is I kept finding stuff that we could do better, right? Or that we needed to fix, or come up with solutions for stuff, help people come up with better ideas of how we can make more money, do mortgages faster, calculate all that different stuff. So when you go through that route, they were always like, he's trying more than a lot of people, right? And credit to everybody that's here is that, and it's the culture still that way, is that if you show ambition, you show that you're willing to think outside the box, you're willing to use your brain, and you're willing to dedicate your time, is the sky's the limit. I was like, because we really, I always like to say that the guys that are here, like the C-suite guys, so the CEO, CFO, COO, they want to take over the world. And so do I. I was like, so it was a match that was made in heaven. And kind of how I get into the SVP role of the mortgage company is whenever we're going through 2022, that was 2020, 2021 were probably the two best times in recent memory, if not of all time, to be in home building and or mortgages. So we did very, very well throughout that part, and we were growing very fast. But then 2022 happened, and that was probably, besides 2023, the worst time ever to be in the mortgage world. So we had a lot of moving parts. We went from being a broker, which means that we would just originate the loan and sell it, to being an independent mortgage bank, which means we're pretty much a bank without deposits. So we were going through that transition during COVID, whenever it was blowing, everything was getting out of control. Like there was more business than you could do. And then we were still going through that transition as it slowed down, right? So going through that process, there was a lot of positions that weren't needed when we were a broker that all of a sudden were needed whenever you were going to be your own bank, essentially. So with that, it's the same mindset that I had, is that if they ask me to do something, or if I see something that needs to be fixed, I go fix it. That's how you get to SVP in that period of time. And that they tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, we need you to go do this. And I guess I'm either too dumb or, I don't know, too confident. I'll just say yes. I said yes.
That's great. That's great. I'm curious, Dana, did you have any role models growing up?
Yeah, I was like, so my biggest role model is, I'll say this to the day I die, is still my dad. All right. So my dad, for the longest time, most people in my family, like most people in Louisiana, there's not a lot of professionals in the family. So he was always the one, didn't go to college, just graduated high school. Probably one of the smartest guys that I know, from a book smart perspective, that he can learn almost anything, but from a street smarts or common sense perspective also. So he always taught me is that You never lie to anybody. If you have a problem with somebody, you tell them that. If they have a problem with you, they tell you that, right? And you're a man of your word. So if you tell somebody this is what you're going to do, you don't need a contract, right? Obviously, you still need contracts. I'm CPA. That's my CPA side coming out. We need contracts. But he instilled those values in me whenever I was very young. And he would get up, he would go work at the plants most of the time. If somebody's dad works there, which most people around here's parents do, is they're leaving at 4 a.m. All right. So they go at 4 a.m. They go work at a place that could blow up any day. And he would go do that, work his 10-hour shifts, and then he would come home. He would take care of us. He would always come to all my games. And then he would go and he had to use car lots. Right. So he always was doing something. All right. So we had the car lots, and then you would come up. He would buy at Christmas time, we would buy container ships of like mopeds. Right. I was like, so we would buy these container ships of mopeds, and we would install them, put them together, and then we would buy a place in the mall for Christmas time, and we would sell them all. So,
dude, that's awesome. What a culture to grow up in. That's incredible. So that was like the annual family tradition when everyone else is like thinking about winding down, and here's the Hendrixes with their container full of mopeds selling them in the mall, right?
Yeah, he always would. He was always coming up with different stuff to do. Right.
Yeah.
I was like, that was always that was a theme. Right. So even my friends, if you'd come over to the house, they were like, because he would take off every year. Like he would take off completely from work every year for like the last 3 weeks of the year. So he didn't have to wake up at 4 to go to the plant. So after like 2 or 3 days, he already slept enough. He's rejuvenated. You did not want to be at my house or anywhere associated in the vicinity for the last 3 weeks of the year, because he was going to have you doing something. It didn't matter who came over.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what's your relationship like now?
Great. I still talk to him multiple times a week, go see him, go over to their house on Sundays and eat dinner. I was like, he's still my role model.
Yeah.
I was like, so he's taught me almost everything that I know, right, from being a good person perspective, right? And that means that you're not always perfect either, right? And that's something that I got to watch him go through and learn, right? Is that even if you look up to somebody and they're a great man in your eyes or a great person, that doesn't mean they're perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means that you don't have to be perfect either. So that was always something that kind of, I guess, goes into some of the confidence level, right? I've always seen him be able to get us into situations that he may not have known how to handle, and we figured it out, and we were always fine. So to me, I'm like, I'm his son. I have the same abilities that he has. We're gonna figure it out.
Yeah, I love that. Are there any other mentors, whether it's like, you know, people from school or people in your career that you've that you found and latched on? And obviously this podcast is about mentorship, and I'm curious how you started those relationships, and if you've got any tips or advice for any other of the listeners or viewers who are really looking for their own mentors. If you're enjoying this podcast, please don't forget to leave us a rating and review on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. And do share with a friend if you think this might inspire them. That's what this podcast is all about. That's why I run it. And because this is a very early stage podcast, any social sharing we can get really helps. Back to the show.
Yeah, and what I would say is that I've had mentors throughout my entire life. And I think that's part of one of my favorite mentors was one of my coaches in high school. And he actually passed away, rest in peace, 2 years ago. And he always told me whenever I was a lot young, well, I'm still not very old, but that I was like a baby boomer in a Gen Z body. He was like, because I would always had the ability, I like talking to the older people, right? So I would figure out, so say my dad, say my coaches in high school, or anybody that was further ahead than me. And it was never coming from a place of like, oh, I show up, I want you to teach me everything that you know, like kind of a more of a needy type of a place. Is that I always would approach it from, hey, I'm very interested in this and I'm providing value up to them, and they reciprocate that back.
Yeah.
Right? Because they actually want to spend time with me. I was like, so if they actually want to spend time with me, I get a lot more of their time than I would get if they didn't. Right. So I made sure that whatever we had discussed in the time beforehand that I actually addressed that, right? That I did that and I came back with new ideas. Say, hey, I know we talked about XYZ. I went and did XYZ with that information. It's doing awesome. Or I did it and it blew up in my face. How do you handle that?
Hmm.
And they're like, yeah, I knew it was going to blow up. I just wanted to see if you were going to do it. I was like, well, thanks.
I was just curious. I just needed someone to test that crazy idea.
And I'm the guy. I'm like, I'm willing to do it. I was like, so I would say even here is that we have our CEO, CFO, CFO's Jeff Prepara. So he was the guy who I came under whenever I first got here. And I would say he's a great role model, right? Because he's from here. He's from locally in the Baton Rouge area. And I think I would like to credit a lot of the success of coming up is that he was willing to give me the nod to do it. Right. I was like, so when I came up into DSLD, he was my direct supervisor. So I would go to him, whatever. He was the one who told me, if you see a problem, I expect you to fix it. Right. With no other parameters. So I was doing that and I would come back to him and he was like, is this what you wanted? He was like, well, I just wanted you to do like this, but yeah, that's cool too. I'm like, you did way more than I wanted you to do. I was like, so I like to credit the success currently here to him. I think he's a great businessman in a perspective of how do you have more of that financial mindset, right? In business, especially when you get bigger, is that I think he has a great balance between work and life. Like that a lot of people struggle to get, especially when you're building and coming up, is he has a good balance there to me. And I always try to emulate that. And he also has a very good way of making complicated subjects simple too. So we just went and did a big bond deal. And literally we're sitting there negotiating with the biggest bankers in the world. We're doing sales pitches and all that stuff. And dude's not even sweating. I was like, so it's just a way of showing like, this is how you do this. This is how you handle this uncomfortable conversation with this person, and just take notes and find ways that you can add value to that. And you keep getting invited back to the room.
I love that. You mentioned earlier that DSLD as an organization wants to take over the world, and that kind of suits you because you want to take over the world too. Have you always been super ambitious?
Yes. So I have, my mom would always tell a great story about that. Always, I'll encapsulate it in this word, right? Is that my brother, who's probably 13, 14 years older than me, he's the oldest out of the five of us, is he got me a shirt when I'm maybe 6 years old, right? And he would get me one every year and they would just say, we all know you're everyone's favorite. You don't have to say it. It's like a 6-year-old, right? I was like, so I had that shirt that's just always kind of what I had. I always said that I would tell my mom that I was sent here for a reason. I don't know what that was for, but I know I was born here for a reason. God sent me here to make a difference in the world. And I'm going to keep doing that until the day that I die. Because I think as long as I'm still here, that he sent me here to do great things. And that every morning, sometimes when I go to bed, I'm like, I don't know if I have enough energy to wake up tomorrow. I'm like, when I wake up, I'm like, well, I guess I still got stuff to do. Time to go do it.
That's awesome. I'm getting a sense from you, Dana, that you're quite difficult to intimidate. Like you talk about being in these rooms, doing these huge bond deals, and looking over at the CFO, and they're not even sweating. But I also get that sense from you, like you're not afraid of authority. You're not afraid to push against things. I wonder, are there times where you feel like you've pushed to your limit, you feel really nervous, and you're like, I'm not sure if I can do this? Like, for example, in big deals like that.
I do get nervous, right? And I do get nervous, and I do feel from time to time like, okay, can we actually pull this off? But it's usually never in a interaction with the person, right? Because the higher that we've gone up and seen different stuff, is that you really do get to see at a local level, because it's not Baton Rouge and Louisiana is bigger, right? But where I grew up, and then from where we started at here, is that who the local politician is, or the guy that is the banker doing the bond deal, right? So you went to school with him. You saw him whenever he was 10, and now he's 50, and you're like, okay, I'm like, that's still the same guy that I knew since I was 10, right? Y'all might not have that close relationship anymore, but it gives you that same mindset, in my opinion, to be like, they're just another human being, right? we're here to both, neither one of us are trying to do anything wrong to each other. We're trying to come together and find a deal that works out for the both of us. And that's what we're here to do. So there should be no intimidation, in my opinion, because you get that, see that level of familiarity at the local level from where I started at. And I was like, okay, Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan is just like the guy at the local bank down in the town I grew up in, right? He was a normal guy, right? He's a very special guy. I was like, but there's really not much different to him, in my opinion, than me. But I also treat people from the CEO down to the receptionist in the front and the janitors the same way. All right, I'll treat you with respect. I genuinely am curious if I'm talking to you and asking you a question. I want to know what you have to say. If I'm asking for your input, that doesn't mean that I'm going to do what you said, but I'm genuinely asking because I'm going to take into consideration in my decision-making process. But I was going to say to address the last point was the times where I get nervous, and I think other people can get nervous here too, is that I'm very ambitious. I was like, so I set goals that are out there and that are aggressive. And I do that not in a structured way in my head saying, hey, I'm gonna set this goal that's this far out because I want to do X, Y, Z. Is like, I see where we want to go. I want to hit that target, but then I go out and tell people that that's what we're going to do. And it puts pressure on me. That's when I feel nervous. I'm like, okay, I've gone and made all these promises to everybody. I have to be a man of my word. Now we have to figure it out. I was like, and you'll sit there and you're like, I don't know if we could do this. Like, but you already made the promise to everybody that this is what we're going to do. So now it's time to get over your insecurities, get over your doubts, do whatever you need to do that. And now we have to go and do what we promised everybody that we're going to do. I was like, but that it's not always an easy discussion with myself. That's an internal discussion.
And how do you, I mean, I love that. And I think it's so powerful, isn't it? If you tell people your goals and you build, you're using your own sort of integrity as leverage to achieve them, because you're like, well, I can't show everyone that I'm failing or that I'm not delivering what I promised that we would deliver. So it certainly adds a lot of pressure. And I think some people would look at that pressure as being unwelcome. They'd say, it's difficult enough in my life. I don't want to add that sort of layer of pressure, but you're clearly embracing that and using that as a tool to help you achieve more, which I think you have in common with a lot of people who do this type of thing, is we actually enjoy that pressure and use it as a tool rather than something to just always try and avoid.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely something I see in other people who are high achievers. They have some way of getting themselves motivated for the long term, right? So for me, that's one way that I do it. I was like, because the higher you get, and you understand this, is that whenever I make those promises, I'm not just making the promise to my wife and my family, my kids, right? We have hundreds of employees, right? So I'm making hiring decisions, firing decisions. Are we going to build a building? Are we not? I'm touching a lot of people's lives and their dreams whenever I make that decision, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, I don't know if I have the energy to do this today. And then I think about it and do that. I'm like, no, I'm like, you don't have a choice, right? Because if I don't go out and do what I'm supposed to do, there's hundreds of people whose lives can be affected in ways that I never even will see and understand.
I'm curious. We've spoken about your strengths and your superpowers. What do you think you really suck at? What are you terrible at?
What I am terrible at, right? So this is if you ask people who are here what that is, they would all be able to tell you that. Is that one is like written communication. Is that if you text me, I wish I could show you my phone right now. Just from today, I think I have like 80 something text messages that I haven't read. Right. Because when I get locked in to something, like with a person, like I'm not on my phone. Right. So if you send me an email, if you send me a text message or call me, right, and I don't have my phone immediately on me and I'm talking to somebody about something or I'm doing it, that's what I'm doing. I was like, so that others, you got to get in line. So I have a quote around, if you weren't on the schedule for me to talk to you and something is blowing up and it's not super important to me, it's like an old meat deli. It's like, go pull a number and go stand in the back of the line. I'll call your number when it's not. So that is a weakness. I have to get better at at getting faster at communicating, because the bigger you get in an organization, there's more things going on a daily basis that you have to get people to run that you don't need to be involved in, but you still have to be their leader, right?
Mm.
So that means you have to make time for them. In my opinion, how I look at it is I have to make time for them to teach them how to be their mentor, how to do all this stuff. And that gets more difficult to do the larger the organization gets, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. So what sort of people do you tend to surround yourself with? Knowing the type of person that you are, do you tend to try and find people who can do that type of admin stuff, or like what are the characteristics of the people that you continually find yourself hanging around with?
So the people I love to hang around with, and I'm blessed to have a lot of them, are very detailed oriented people, right? Because I'm a more big ideas, right? And I can get into the details. I was like, but I'll put it to you this way. So going through college is I wouldn't take notes. I got a 4.0 in all accounting and finance classes, but I would not take notes. I'll go to class and listen. So I would go and listen, but I would make deals with most time girls because they're better at this than guys, in my opinion. I would make deals with them that they would take all the notes, and then I would teach them after the class. So they would give me all the notes, and I would reteach them what we just did in the lecture. So that's the same operation how I run it now, is that when we go do a meeting or we're coming up with ideas of structures, how we're going to do processes, is that I can lay out how it's supposed to look, but then I need somebody else to come back behind me and actually put the details in, and then I can recheck and say, yes, that's exactly what we were supposed to do. But if you need me to go in and write every single detail, cross every T, dot every I cannot do that at scale unless it's accounting.
Right.
That's the only thing I can do that's that detailed and do it quickly. Everything else I need detailed, almost painfully detailed people around me to make sure everything's buttoned up.
I think it's wild that you had the self-awareness to figure that out so early and to build a structure around you. I think that's extraordinary levels of like self-observation to see that that's the team that you built a team to get through college, right?
Yeah.
That's wild.
Well, see, and that's always the thing that I think, because people will tell me from time to time that like, oh, you're very smart. I don't think so. I really don't think I'm overly intelligent. What I think I'm probably, if you had to lay me up against my siblings, I'm probably number 4 or 5 out of intelligence level, in my opinion. If you had to put me against anybody else, I don't think I'm overly above average in intelligence. I just don't think I am. So with that, if I wanted to compete anywhere, I always needed help. So when I first started school, I needed help, right? So to me, that works well in business also, because in school, if you need help, it's called cheating. In life, if you need help, it's called winning.
It's teamwork, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
And actually, that's an interesting sort of thread that has come through a bunch of these interviews for this podcast, is that you're not the first person who said, I don't consider myself to be above average intelligence, but they've got a level of self-awareness. They know how they work, and they know how to build a structure around them that gets the best out of them and allows them to do the things that they are extraordinary at, whilst having other people handle the other pieces. So that seems to be a bit of a thread amongst achievers, that they come across that realization early and aren't afraid to do that. Because that's another example of you being quite, I guess, counter-authoritarian, isn't it? Where you're building that team in college. That's not, you don't get the professor saying, right, these are the little pods that you need to build and do deals with each other. Like that's not a thing. You have to have the confidence to know yourself, and also to know that you can do that and you can sort of push the boundaries a little bit. Yeah,
I was like, because we wouldn't help each other with tests and stuff like that. I was like, but that was always something that I ran into in high school too, is that I would do the same thing. I've been running this game since junior high. I was like, it's the same thing. It's that I would get in trouble for it. It's because they said, no, you have to do it by yourself. They have to do it by themselves. I was like, and I was always like, okay, well, if you want me to do it by myself and I can't get anybody to help me, like I'll take the test by myself. I was like, but all the prep work and everything else like that, then I might just not go to your class then. if we're just making up rules.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Everyone can make up rules. I love it. I want to ask you about work-life balance, because obviously you're in a sort of space where long work hours can be very, very common in finance and banking. You've got a young family. You mentioned that your CFO at DSLD has a really good approach there. What's your approach to work-life balance? How hard and how long do you work?
So I work extremely hard and extremely long. So that's another, you go back to the weaknesses. That's still something that I work on daily, right? It's because I have a 5-week-old, right, that's at home. So part of the trade-off that you have to make, in my opinion, especially when you're growing, is that you do have to trade stuff, right? So you have to make that determination, in my opinion, early on, communicate that with the people who you care about around you. And that, in all honesty, is not going to sound very nice. I was like, but it's not a very large group either, because you don't have time for it to be a large group. So whenever it comes through, is I see my kids whenever I bring them to school a couple days a week. All right, and I go to different offices that are closer. I was like, but on a normal basis, I'm working 6 days a week, and it's probably 12-hour days, right? I was like, and that's just the price of admission. Is that the price of admission long term? No. I was like, but that's the price that you build when you're chasing after a dream, in my opinion. I was like, and my wife, my kids, they all understand that, right? My kids are so young, right? So you have to keep reminding them. But to me, it's the same way that I watched from my dad, right? Is that this is what you're teaching them to do. If you want to chase after your dreams, right? And he always brought us along with him. My kids and wife always come up to the offices where we're at. I like to bring them around where we go places. I was like, but that is what you do, right? Is that I want them to see that if you actually are passionate about something and you really want to go for it, then you go for it. And the people who love you will support you for that. Right. But you have to make sure that when you win, this is a very crucial piece that people need to remember, that when you win, you can't be the only person that wins. Right. So when you win, everybody else that's around you, including the people at your company, including your family and their family, has to win. So whenever I win, we win. And whenever they win, we win.
This is not a sort of a popular message these days about, working long hours and being clear with those sacrifices. But again, it's somewhat of a common theme amongst these interviews that people say, do you know what? There are times in our careers when we're growing something where we have to put in the sort of hours that you don't see advertised in job descriptions very often. And you can't have everything. You can't have 100% of everything. There has to be trade-offs.
I was like, so I want to say that it was Thomas Sowell who said this, but I don't want to misquote him. But he said there's only trade-offs in life, right? There's no one decision. There's no decisions. It's just trade-offs, right? Because if you're deciding to do this thing, you're deciding to not do a bunch of other stuff, right? I was like, so everything that you do, you're deciding to not do something else. So you have to go ahead and come to grips with that and make sure that what you're deciding to do is what you really want, and you communicate that with everybody that you care about. I don't know any other way of doing it that works.
If the I don't know what age, maybe 12-year-old Dana could see what you've done now and how far you've got in your career at such a young age, what do you think he'd say?
I think he would say, that's cool. Well, why aren't you Jeff Bezos yet? He would say something.
Really?
Yeah.
Come on, loser.
Yeah. He would be proud. I'm like, but he would always, that's what I just think that's the truth.
Yeah.
Right. Is that I'm always, I think like, okay, whenever you succeed at something, I'm like, okay. But like I said, is that every day that I wake up, I know that I'm still sitting here to do something. So that means whatever I did the day before, no matter how good it was, no matter what happened, today's a new day. And that means I have to go do something else. I was like, so that's been my mindset for a long time. I think he would be proud. And, but yeah, I think he would say, keep going. He goes, maybe you should go work out a little bit. You might have been eating too many hamburgers.
Love that. He sounds great. Dana, this is awesome. One parting piece of wisdom or advice for our listeners that are inspired by your journey? It's a tough one.
Whatever fires you up, that is what you need to go after, right? But you need to decide to do it. Because I had one thing in my life from whenever I was very little, I thought the thing that I was put here to do was to be in the NFL. I really did. I learned at 19 or 20 that probably was not going to be the path that was going to be destined for me. So before that point in time, everything in my life was geared towards doing that. I woke up, ate, how I lived my life during the day, how I slept was geared towards being the best football player that I could be. So whenever I saw that dream go away, I was like, man, I missed my only shot in my life that I had to be successful and to do anything. I'm gonna have to go back home, go work in a plant, which is not bad. I was like, go do something or go to the Army and go get shot at. Like I was like, my world was crushed. So I had to come up with a new purpose for what I was here to do. And whenever I did that, God blessed me with the second opportunity to be successful. And whenever I got that, I'm not gonna let it go. So if you're lucky enough to get blessed with an opportunity of any magnitude that is something that fires you up, you have to run after it with everything you got. Because you don't know how long it's gonna last.
Great advice. Yeah, great advice. When you find something in your arc, take a big swing, as Warren Buffett would say.
Yeah.
Great. Dana, thanks for joining us. This has been awesome, dude.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.